Now we're going to start taking a look at the way this application is put together. As I said earlier on in this chapter, we're not going to look at the programming specifics of how this application works. We're just going to look at the ways in which it makes use of MySQL queries and the way in which the data is moved between MySQL and the application. I've included the source code on this CD, so if you want, you can peruse the design of the application itself at your leisure. However, it's outside the remit of this title to go into too great specifics about a technology which is essentially irrelevant to the main content of this title. Let's take a look, to begin with, at the scribble that we made earlier on in this chapter. This is a fairly close representation of the piece of paper in which I sketched some ideas when I was coming up with a design for this application. If we strip away the extraneous circles and arrows, we can see that there are a fairly specific set of elements or functions that go to make up the functionality of the application. We can easily turn these into a set of scripts. Now, depending on which kind of programming language you use, which kind of application development environment, you are going to build your application in different ways. Since I'm using PHP, I've used a number of different scripts that are going to work together to form the application. It's going to serve HTML, and it's going to also query the database to provide the content and the interactivity. There's another element, and these all fit together into one unity over here. The principal element being main.php and all the other functionality leading off that, just like in our rough diagram we looked at earlier. So what we're going to do is we're going to look through each of these parts of the application bit by bit, and the bits that we're going to be looking at are going to be the SQL queries that are embedded within the application code. I'm going to extract these to make it easy and clear to see how the application is using MySQL. Our login script, login PHP, does a number of things. It has to connect to MySQL, and it has to locate the user that's been specified in the employees table. To connect to MySQL, we simply use the PHP MySQL connect function. To locate the user in the employees table, however, we have to actually submit an SQL query using our PHP script. And the query is something like this. Select title and ID from the employees table, where concat first name surname equals, and here's an application variable that I'm using to represent a variable that is going to be manipulated by the application itself. I've used the concat function, which is a MySQL function which essentially runs two strings or alphanumeric values together. So the first name and last name of the on the employees table are going to act together as the username for the employee. The logout script contains no queries at all. So let's take a look at the way this works within the application. If we move over to our text editor, we'll see the script that's being used. This is main.php. This is the central script from which everything else is processed. It's of no interest to us, however, because it contains no SQL. The login script is the one that contains the SQL that we've seen here. As you can see, it looks very similar to how I've extracted it in the previous screen. However, certain things are different, such as the use of variable names, but essentially it does similar things. As for how the rest of the script works, if you're familiar with PHP, then by all means examine the script at your own leisure. However, for the purposes of this title, we're going to ignore that for now. If we look in our web browser, and I must apologize for the limited view we have here in this particular web browser, it's because of the screen size and of a configuration issue that's prevented me from running my usual web browser. However, this one will do the business for the purpose of viewing our simple web page. So let's try to log in. I've created some sample users, some sample employees, and one of them is called Bob Slack. And the password encoded is sleep. It's not a particularly hard-working employee. However, when we hit the login button, as you can see, the login script has allowed Bob Slack to enter the administration system, and the fact that he's there means that this menu has changed. Now we're seeing the different options that he has for manipulating the different parts of the application, and he can opt as well to log out. So let's take a look at what happens when we log out. We return to the login page, just as we should do given the original scribbling structure that we wrote down before. In our next movie, we're going to move on and look at the next detail of this application's functionality.